Hey, I'm Sarah Smith, family doctor, clinical day advisor, and the chatting coach. Welcome back to Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast, where we're going to be interviewing peers or world experts who can help us think about our clinical day in a way that is more sustainable and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Today we have with a special guest, Nakia Smith. Lovely to have you here. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Totally. So tell us about you.
Okay. I'm Dr. Nakia Smith. I'm a board certified anesthesiologist. I'm a wellness coach and a retreat curator. And I recently just started sharing my story on platforms about how I personally went through burnout, not once, but twice, to the point where I wanted to leave medicine altogether, and how I kind of recovered from that and found ways to stay in medicine without losing myself in the process.
Okay, I love that. And we're going to enjoy hearing some of these stories. So tell us then about your journey in medicine. What pulled you into anesthetics as a specialty, kind of your progress through medicine? How did that go?
So I'm just one of those kids that wanted to be a doctor all my life. I don't even know exactly why. I'm assuming something I watched on TV or something I saw or heard. No personal story with medicine as a child, but I just said, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. And I pretty much stuck to that. Of course, everybody around me was like, yeah, that's great. So there's no reason to like rethink that direction or trajectory. I volunteered in hospitals, did everything I could to make everything, seamless and smooth as possible. And when I got into medical school, I knew I wanted to be in the OR, which is why I think it was from watching TV. But I did my very first day of surgery rotation and was like, absolutely, I cannot be a surgeon. I'm not about this life. And as I was talking about it, the anesthesiologist peeked from behind the drape, and I was like, who is that back there and what do they do? And I learned about anesthesia. I had a great mentor, and I'm just happy I discovered it because it truly is my favorite. It's got everything I wanted to do. I'm still in the OR. I'm still engaging with patients, and I get to live the life I always wanted. So I went through anesthesia training, took my steps and my boards, and now I've been an attending anesthesiologist for 10 years.
Got it. Okay. So then tell us about this burnout that happened. What was that about?
Yeah, it was terrible. And so I do like to give this like visual that I think that burnout is like a big boiling pot of water. And
Mhm.
you don't go from, flat water to boiling quickly. It takes a while. You put it on high heat, nothing happens. And then you start to get a simmer, and then suddenly it's a big boiling pot of water. So for me, I would say my simmer started around my third or fourth year of being an attending. I started to get a little bit, agitated, irritable, more annoyed, a little bit more tired than I had been. And at that point, at that job, we had lost some of our colleagues to moves and to other things. And so we were just really working short staffed. And so that was like the first thing that tipped me over. And then I was looking for other jobs and looking for other kinds of schedules that might benefit me better. But I did realize, they say it's the same everywhere. It was kind of similar. I would exchange a job that was less physically taxing for a more emotionally taxing job, or I would exchange a job for this hours for this hours. And so I really was burnt out to the point where I wanted to leave medicine completely after I took what I thought was going to be like my dream job. And I was working so many hours. I did not have enough reprieve to restore. And after a particularly brutal call shift where I was actively working for like nearly 20 hours, I was like, that's it. I'm leaving medicine. I'm going to go work at Trader Joe's. I'm going to clock in and clock out, and my life will be easy. um, and so it wasn't until I got to that point, which I call the roaring, like I was burnt to a crisp, the pan was burnt out, like that I realized that, yes, something is wrong. And yes, healthcare has its own challenges, but there was some changes that I needed to make in order to make my life how I wanted it to be in healthcare. And so I started doing some work then to recover from my burnout.
Okay, so I got to the yes, the healthcare system is broken.
Yes. So yes, like I said, the healthcare system is broken, and if they want profits, we want to help people. But I realized that if I got to this point, if I wanted to stay in healthcare, I would have to do some work personally to figure out how I can go about doing that, because following the mold and doing it just how it's been done before, the standard was clearly not working for me. And so I started working on myself, for my burnout recovery, which took a lot. So, and I also want to say that, like, when to recover, it didn't take, you went into burnout over years. You don't come out of burnout over a weekend. Okay. People are like, I'm going to sleep for one weekend and I won't be burnt out anymore. And I'm like, that's not how that works. It does take a lot of work to kind of, regulate your nervous system again and kind of get yourself rested and fully rejuvenated and recharged. And I found that redefining how I worked in medicine was the fundamental step of like not succumbing to burnout again.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. Can you step us back to when you first noticed you were getting a bit grouchy and a bit cynical, and what were you noticing, or did you notice yourself, the physical things about you or your emotional state? Did you notice that in the moment? What did you make of that? Was anybody else poking you and saying, "Hey, Nakia"?
Yeah, and so that it's a combination. There are some things that I noticed, and so this is probably the first thing that like a lot of people who work in clinical medicine do notice, is that they do feel more tired, and when they do try to rest more or sleep more, they're still finding themselves tired. I'm like, oh, I would go to bed earlier. I would take an entire weekend of doing nothing and trying to sleep as much as possible, and I would still be tired. And that's kind of the first sign that it's deeper than just a physical exhaustion. That's the
Mhm.
burnout, and it's emotional and mental, and it takes a toll as well. For me, I'm already like an easily annoyable person. Like I can be annoyed, but usually it passes quickly. I'm like, oh, and then I'm like over it. But I found myself being more irritable, and I found it lasting longer. And eventually it kind of turns into a numbness. So it's like hyper focused on like, oh, that's annoying, that's annoying, that's annoying, to like, I don't care, whatever, I don't care. And when I got to that numbness, I was a little bit concerned. And so the irritability, I didn't quite notice because I'm already annoyed. But like when I
Mhm.
got to the part where I was getting a little bit more numb, moving really more on autopilot and kind of just going through the day and just being like, whatever, that's when I noticed, I'm like, this doesn't even feel like me anymore. So I'm like, this is more than just sleeping. Like now I'm emotionally kind of just checked out. And that's
Mhm.
not good for me as a person. It's not good for any clinician, because we don't want the clinicians to be checked out and just going through the
Mhm.
motions.
Yeah, yeah. You'd mentioned some colleagues had left. The remaining colleagues, were you guys talking? Were you checking in with each other? Was there any of that collaborativeness? Is that part of where you found help with your burnout?
Yes, and that's the problem I think with healthcare, is that we as colleagues are often going to help each other and support each other. But when the system is not supporting us as a whole, there's only so much we can do. So we would help each other and cover each other, but it got to the point where we were all just tired. Like there's
Mm.
no other way to go about it. I can't cover you anymore because I'm tired. And
Mhm.
so they like to say that we're a team and we're family. And I do think that at every job I've ever been at, the immediate group of colleagues, we've always been there to support. But it feels like whenever we get to that point where we can't do anymore, we're not getting that overall administrative support where they are, hiring staff or cutting down on hours to allow us to recover. So that does prolong it, I would say, like prolongs you staying at a job that's draining you because your colleagues are supportive and you do feel that, but that's not enough. And that's the hard
Mhm.
part, the delicate balance of medicine.
Yeah. Were you guys asking for or advocating loudly at administration saying we can't keep this up for very long? You've turned the heat up. We're going to all
Yes.
up.
So at first we didn't, because they came to us and they said, "Hey, we know that these three people moved and these people left jobs, and can we just get through this tough time? Can you guys bear with us? We're actively looking." So we're all
Mhm.
like, "Oh, this is just a few months. They'll find somebody." On average in medicine, it takes 3 to 6 months to find and onboard somebody. So we were hopeful. But then as we got to the back end of 6 to 8 months, we're just like, what's happening here? And we did get a response that said, well, you guys are doing so well, you're handling it so well that we figured we didn't need the extra people. And I'm just like, no, you can't ask us to bear with the hard times and then just say, you're handling this burden so well that you guys can just keep handling it. And I do think that I have found that to be a common theme in medicine. They're like, well, you guys are still doing it, so you can keep doing it.
Wow. Oh, how did you guys respond to that response?
It was not good. Actually, after that, a few more of us left. And I was like, we all felt bad. It's like nobody wants to leave because then we know that whoever we're leaving behind is going to, again, get the short stick. But,
Mm.
after that response, I think 3 or 4 more people left. That was when I left that first job because I just felt disrespected at that point. I
Mm.
was like, wow, that's really disrespectful. You didn't like, you just said, well, oh, well, like this is what it's going to be now. And so I was like, it's time to move on.
Okay. Okay. So take us to that. You did that very last 20-hour shift. You were
Mhm.
absolutely spent physically, mentally. What did you go and do to look after yourself? Because you're very vulnerable at that moment, like very
Yeah.
vulnerable mentally and physically. Like, what did that first few days look like?
It was intense, but I think that the first decision that I made that kind of took a big burden off was I said out loud, I am not living like this anymore.
Mhm.
And like I just said it. So like it's done. Like I'm in charge of my life. I'm not doing this anymore. I sent them an email like I'm not taking call anymore. Like this is what happened to me and I refuse to be a part of this. And they were like apologetic about it, but I knew that, just that email wasn't really going to change
Mhm.
everything. It might change things for a month or two, but it wasn't like official in my contract. I realized that this is deeper than exhaustion, and I've had lectures on burnout before, but I was just like, I don't feel like that. I don't feel like that. But then I was like, this is it. Like, this is burnout. So as I was Googling stuff, I was like, okay, compassion fatigue. So then I read a book called Fierce Self Compassion by Kristen Neff. And that was very eye opening for me about the numbness of it all and checking out. And I just started reading anything I could read about burnout and was like, this is me. What do I do? And the part about what do you do is a little bit was a little bit less back then. I mean, it's actually gaining in traction now, so I'm really happy that there's more out there. But even a few years ago, there wasn't as much talk about burnout. I do think that the COVID pandemic kind of pushed the burnout discussions. And so that's the part where I started piecemealing things together, listening to podcasts, reading resources and books, and learning that, aside from just sleeping, I needed to literally like tap back into myself. I had numbed out and I had to like check back in. And that's a process.
Yeah. What did you discover after that burnout? What were the processes you tried that helped you kind of move forward?
Yes. So I discovered that like I had abandoned a lot of things that I used to find enjoyable because I was too exhausted. And a lot of those things that were enjoyable were also recharging to me, but like I wasn't doing them. And all I could do was rest. And so just taking the time out to kind of like do them. I'm like, oh, I have to make time for this, even when I'm tired, because I know that going into it, I'm tired, but when I come out of it, I actually feel better. And then prioritizing movement. We were talking about the rowing machine earlier. I hadn't worked. I'm like, when was the last time I worked out? And I literally could not remember because, again, I was so tired. So I started doing Pilates because I literally was like, what can I do laying down? Like, I'm so tired, like after work, because I'm still working full time at this point. So it's just little tiny
Mm.
things like atomic habits. I started with 5 minutes. Okay, let me just go walk around the neighborhood. Let me just Google what workout I can do lying down and make a plan to try that soon. Let me just, like open a puzzle and just do it for a few minutes. And so
Mhm.
I know people think it's like a drastic thing, but I'm like, it's actually not. It's just the small things that really bring you joy and prioritizing them even when you're exhausted because you know that you can be energized and recharged by them.
Okay. So you're still in that same job at this point? You haven't left
So
there?
at that point, I'm still recovering from my burnout. I'm at that same job. I sent them a very assertive email. And so for the next few months, I have a relatively manageable schedule.
Hmm.
But then in like the January of like that year after my burnout, like on the top of the year, they made an announcement that they had gotten this new contract and that means all of our workflow was going to change. And I was like, I absolutely do not agree to this. I
Hmm.
am trying to work in a different type of way. And your contract is putting me into this other way. We've already had this discussion. And so I was like, I'm going to be giving my notice. And they were like, please don't, we can work with you. And I was like, okay. And that's something I also want to point out to people. If you ask for stuff, a lot of times they'll tell you it's impossible. It can't be done. That's not how we do things. We don't have schedules like that or whatever. And all you can do is keep asking. I encourage people to keep asking because you will eventually find it. No matter how often people tell you it's impossible, you will find it. But they'll tell you it's impossible, then you'll give notice, and then suddenly it might become possible. They said that they would work with me, but they were unwilling to write it in the contract. And I knew better than to sign a contract without my terms on it. So I still left and found a different job that did not have any call. Mm-hmm. And that was my first step. Like my very first thing was, I don't want to take call. And, I didn't go all the way to like, I need all these things. I'm like, this is my one non-negotiable. I'm no longer taking call. And they were unwilling to work with me. So then I found a job that didn't have call, and that built a lot of space in, because now I automatically had nights and weekends to start planning and taking care of myself. And okay.
Perfect. Okay, so you've decided they can't work with me. They've already shown me that they're not trustworthy. They're not willing to write it in the contract. So therefore, I'm not going to take them on face value anymore. We've been a little bit burnt by that system. So for me, it's safer to leave. Okay, understanding that fully. Like, I think that when they first came back to you and said, oh, you guys are handling it well, like, oof, I feel that. Like, oh my gosh. That is not okay.
I'm sure they saw their profit margins go up really high, and they're like, oh, this is great, because now, there's less people covering the same workload. I understand it. Healthcare is a business, but they have to take care of us so that we can take care of the patients.
Yeah. Okay. So you transition into a new job. There's no call. You've got your weekends and evenings back. That sounds amazing. What is happening then? How are you enjoying that? Did that work for you? Is that helping your burnout?
Yes. And so that did help my burnout. I had a more predictable schedule, and that allowed me to start, like I said, doing these things. I started doing puzzles, doing more workouts, I actually scheduled time to call people, because engaging with yourself and engaging with others is a real part of it. When you're burnt out and exhausted, it's a very isolating process. And so connecting with community is really important. And I didn't used to have time for that. So I actually started scheduling things like they were my job. It's like, this is my job to work out today. This is my job to call a friend today. This is my job to read a book for an hour today, and making them a priority, because we often will push all of our needs to the back burner and put everything else as a priority. So that allowed me some kind of time to do that and kind of get my bearings straight and go from the burnt to a crisp up to a solid 80-90%. I would say I was really doing well. And so it takes time. You have to build the time in to let yourself recover. And that's the hard part for a lot of people.
Yeah. All right. So tell us what you're doing now and how you got into that.
Yes. So currently I am on my 4th job as an attending anesthesiologist. I had decided that I wanted to take it up a notch. So after a few years of having no calls and no weekends, I wanted to work part-time. I had got my finances in order, did all the stuff I needed to do. And I'm like, oh, this is the perfect time for me to work less and focus on my entrepreneurship, my community building, and getting my message out there. And my job told me that was impossible, of course, because they don't offer part-time. And I said, oh, that's interesting, because I know we have per diem staff here. So that was a whole negotiation back and forth, but they were unwilling to allow me to have a part-time contract. And at that point, like I said, I knew that that was now my new non-negotiable. And so I started asking around, and a new hospital opened, and I asked, I said, do you guys offer part-time contracts? And he said, actually, we do. And I said, what is the requirement? And he goes, it's going to be 8 days per month. And I said, good, because I only want to work 10 days or less per month. And it ended up being perfect. And I think for now, and I'm currently in Las Vegas, it's the only job offering like a full part-time contract. And it was stipulated in the contract, and everybody agreed on the terms. And so I've been working there for the past year, and it's been great.
Yeah. Now tell us your work with others. So as part of your journey, you've gone and learned some things, and now you're helping others. So tell us more.
Yeah. So the journey is a journey. And as I said, part of it is reconnecting with yourself and kind of establishing what you want and being bold enough to create these boundaries and non-negotiables at work. And as I was kind of living it and sharing it with my friends who are mostly working in healthcare, they all were just really inspired by it. They kept telling me, wow, I can't believe you're doing this. And so part of my journey, I took myself on a wellness retreat. And as I was telling my friends about it, they all decided they wanted to come. And so then my first retreat that was supposed to be my personal wellness retreat ended up being a group of 8 girls, 8 physicians who were all exhausted and burnt out and taking 4 days to themselves. And so now that's become an annual wellness retreat that I host for physicians. And I am currently expanding it to other clinicians in healthcare because now the platform is growing. And it just kind of sparked me to begin my entrepreneurial journey with hosting the retreats and actually coaching women to, come back to themselves and reclaim themselves after burnout and exhaustion. Because it's so easy to be burnt out in clinical medicine, especially as a woman. But I think that women are 1,000% essential in clinical medicine because there's plenty of proof that we are really excellent providers and have great outcomes. And so we have to think this is a field that's been run and dominated by males, and we can't operate it in the same way that they are. But we got to figure out how we can operate it in it and still, remain ourselves. And so that's what my work has been over the past few years.
Love that. So you had at the end of that 20-hour shift said, okay, I'm going to go get a job at Trader Joe's, clock in, clock out, and my life will be wonderful. And then a retreat, I can see people saying, I need to go escape. And it's going to look like a few days and then I'll come back all happy and rejuvenated. What do you do in these 4-day retreats? Is it, I'm just going to chill out and I'll be cared for and pampered and room service and then I'm all better? Like, tell us what happens within a retreat that is so transformative.
Yes. So unfortunately, we all know that going away and coming back does not do much, right? Because we come back to the same situation that we left. And during all of my research and recovery, I learned a lot about moral injury, which is when the healthcare system puts their stipulations on you. And that moral injury that comes from our system is actually what leads a lot to provider burnout because we're operating on their terms, trying to help our patients. So I know that a weekend away isn't enough, but we do go on these retreats. We offer CME and we learn about these things, about burnout recovery. We learn about self-compassion and compassion fatigue. And we learn about perfectionism and all these other things that kind of creep in and contribute to our burnout. Because it's not even just the task that causes the burnout, it's how we also approach it, which is being a high achieving woman. We want it to be perfect and quick and efficient and all of these things. And that also contributes to the burnout. And we also talk about the invisible labor and the third shift that many women have, because most of us are having 2 full-time jobs. We're working all day and then we still have another job when we get home. So there's so much to discuss and to learn. And when you kind of identify that and identify where you're being drained and where you feel like your burnout is really coming from, then you can start to, protect yourself from it. Like, where is your energy being drained? Where are you not prioritizing being recharged, like, abandoning your hobbies, abandoning your fitness routine, abandoning your meetups with friends for other things. And those are the areas where you would be recharging and helping yourself recover, where you're prioritizing other obligations. So we kind of go over all of that. And so when you come back, it's like you are feeling refreshed because we do sleep in and we do have massages and we do activity and yoga and stuff. But we also come back with a refreshed mindset, and you kind of feel empowered because you know that you're not alone and that we've discussed this as a group. So if you go back and say, I'm going to tell them at work, blah, 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 and then that happens, you can text me and be like, girl, I told them, and this is what they said, and help me write a reply email. Like, you're not just kind of handling everything alone. We're over here helping people write emails, sharing alternative schedules that we've heard of or that we've had ourselves, so that people know that this stuff can happen. I always share my story about my shifts because people are like, oh, they tell me it's not possible. I'm like, I work this, it's possible. So just keep telling them that it's possible, and eventually, you'll find it. So that's the part I think that really helps, is that community.
Yeah, connection. I think it's more of an intensive than a retreat, but we
Yeah.
better not say intensive because that sounds opposite of retreat.
I know. It's like, I mean, the part we do again, there's like we drink wine and we relax and go to the massage. So that's the retreat part. And we definitely sleep in. But yeah, there is some emotional intensive work going on as far as recognizing and releasing the parts that, we have control over.
Yeah. What would you be advising for people who feel like they're in that place where they're not being respected by their work? They're really, really feeling the heat of what's being required of them. They're not really sure where to start. They really have abandoned everything for the ability to be horizontal when they get home.
Mm.
Where is a place to start? What do you start to notice about these types of physicians that's very helpful?
Yes. So I do think that when you're in that position, it feels like it's overwhelming. It feels very heavy. And that makes you want to kind of be isolated, like in your own head. Maybe you're going to be online Googling things, but I do think that that is a time to start talking to others. And if you're not comfortable with talking to your colleagues, then maybe you have some other ex colleagues or coworkers that you can talk to, because that's when you kind of get these ideas of what's possible. It's hard to talk to somebody who's in it with you about what's possible in that situation because you're both being told the same things. But when you start talking to other people about your experience, you do get validation because they are experiencing it. But then maybe you find someone like me or someone like someone else who said, "Oh, I was there and this is what I did. And let me help guide you." And that's what I want to do now. Like if people feel like that, I want them to come to me and ask me, and so that I can go through different things with them. Of course, all the systems are different, all of the burnouts are different. So I do, it's a kind of a high touch one-on-one thing, because sometimes what you need is more simple than you think, but it's just the last thing that you're thinking of. Like
Mm.
some women just need movement. They're like, I just feel like this. And I'm like, oh, well, have you tried all these things? And one woman, she was like, I'm doing yoga, I'm walking, I don't feel any better. And I'm like, well, when do you have the most joy? And she's like, I just like to go out dancing. I'm like, so you like to go out dancing and you want to do more movement, but you're not making your movement the dancing. And it was this like that simple. I mean, I don't want to say that simple, but like it's just like putting the dots together. But when you're trying to do all these things, eat healthy, get your
Mm.
work done, do this and do that, you don't think about the thing that actually causes you joy being the thing that will change everything. But it could be as simple as dancing or doing a puzzle or getting a puppy. Like, I don't know. But when you talk, you can figure it out. And all of the systems are different, but there are things that you can ask for that they might say no at first, but they might eventually say yes. Like I always encourage people to ask for administrative time. I'm like, if you are on any kind of committee or any kind of extra thing at work, because most of it, oh, can you go on the committee? Oh, can you go to these meetings? I'm like, yes, I can, but then that will require administrative time.
Mm.
And when you
Oh, I
start
love
processing,
that.
yeah, but you have to know that way when you whenever they ask you, you can be prepared, And so
Mm.
people are like, well, I can't do it now. I'm like, you still can. You can say, hey, I've been enjoying being on this committee, but I'm finding that now I'm behind in my charts or I'm behind in my patient load, and I think that blocking off 2 hours to prepare for the meeting and debrief from the meeting would be optimal. Or like just things that moving through that you can try to make it more sustainable for yourself by building these times out. So it just kind of depends on where the drain is, and where what can help you restore and buy back some of that time.
Yeah, I love that. I know that we are always asked to do more, but we may not necessarily pause and reflect on what is the time cost of this ask. When
Mm-hmm.
will I fit it in if I'm already full?
Yeah.
Is that less sleep in my week? Like, what does it truly cost me to say yes to that? And then how to proceed in a way that's kind and caring and self-compassion, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
some
there's a
important.
way, yeah, and that's what I said. It's a delicate way to assert your boundary and enforce it without you know coming across as not a team player, they like to say. So
Yeah, yeah. Other ways people have created sustainability, do you feel like it is that contract negotiation and really changing the system around you? Have you seen people stay within the system but address it or actively move in it in a different way from the inside out?
I have seen a few, and they have like stayed in the system and kind of changed positions. There are different ways to go about it, and I think especially more in the nursing field, I've seen a lot of nurses make these transitions from clinical to maybe a more administrative role or a teaching role. And that has been very helpful. And also some of my colleagues, they have like, oh, I decided to cut back clinically and become faculty at the medical school or, the undergrad, so that they can at least build out one day of teaching time. And that builds in like, okay, I'm still practicing medicine, but now I have one protected day. And then, contract negotiations are a sticky subject. I'm not going to say that I'm a negotiation expert, but I do know that a lot of clinicians, because we're not really trained to contract negotiate, especially women, don't negotiate their contracts. So we kind of just get what is dealt to us. And I do believe that, like, every contract I've signed, I've gotten a little bit better at understanding what that means and asking for something to be changed. And so I do think it's something that comes with practice. And that's why also it's helpful to talk to people who have been there before and kind of see what they have asked for and see if it's reasonable within your role.
Love that. How do people connect with you if they're looking to connect and learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm such a millennial. I love my email. So the best way to contact me personally is hello@sheisfireforge.com. I reply to all the emails, and I love to hear people's stories, and I love to, offer advice or suggestions based on my personal experience. So if you're listening and have any kind of questions, that's the best way. I'm also on Instagram at She Is Fire Forged and at Nakia Smith MD, where I just kind of share hopefully empowering and funny things. You can also slide into my DMs there if you're more comfortable, but I do love talking one-on-one and engaging personally. So anytime you message me, it's me, and I can't wait to hear about what you have going on and how I can help you with burnout and exhaustion.
Love that. Is there anything we didn't talk about that we should talk about before we close up?
Well, I just like to say that, like I said before, the cure for burnout is not necessarily like self-care and sleep. It's tapping back in, engaging with yourself and engaging with community. And I just want everybody to know that, working in clinical medicine, it is changing. It is drastically changing. There's a national shortage of all kinds of providers. And although it feels like we don't have the power, that they still have the power, it's going to be shifting, which is why I tell people keep asking, because they're going to get to a critical level. And it's better to have you part-time or 4 days a week than it is to not have you at all. So I just encourage people to ask for what they want, to look for what they want, and just be patient, because I do know that collectively we're changing the face of medicine.
Love it. Very good. Well, thank you so much for this conversation and then for the work that you do.
Thank you so much for having me. And the work that
All right,
do
everybody.
to share these stories.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye. Hey, if you found this podcast episode helpful, I would encourage you to like and subscribe. Every time you do, you help a colleague or friend find our podcast, and it can help them too. Don't forget to share it along with your friends. If you're looking for extra help, don't forget we have charting champions for physicians and smarter charting for nurse practitioners and other clinicians to help you get home with your work done. We are helping you create sustainable clinical medicine. Thanks for listening.